And it's me, so one old Paul friends, welcoming you to Starfleet Universe on call. And tonight, well, we got me, we've got Barry. I'm not, Dave is probably hanging around. Don't know where he is, but I'm sure he's hanging around somewhere. So with that, hey Barry, how you doing?
Outstanding, outstanding. How are you doing?
Good, I'm doing good. Ben,
Yeah. What is tonight's topic? Are
tonight's
we
topic,
doing a
another.
ship versus ship?
Mm-hmm. It's I, I was thinking about it. I think about it. I went. There's one which is I like the interaction just because of the weapon interaction, and that is the Lyran tournament cruiser versus the Hydran.
Oh, okay. You said weapon, not web. I was thinking it
No,
was going to be something
weapons,
totally okay.
i.e., the
Lyr-
interaction of the
Lyran
ESG.
versus
Yep, ESG versus the Hellbore.
and Hellboars.
Yeah, which I think is an
Yes.
interesting interaction because of the thing is with those two weapon systems, it gives the Lyran has to make some decisions on how he's going to use his
Mm-hmm.
ESGs, which are not in any other matchup. There is that decision is not the same, just because
That is
of the
true.
weapon interaction.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because
Yeah, because the Hellboar automatically hits if the ESG is up.
right, but the one thing to keep in mind about that interaction is also that it makes the ESG like a Hellbore shield.
Yes, it does.
Because the Hellboard reduces the strength of the ESG, and if the ESG is actually stronger than the Hellboard, then basically the Hellboard does nothing against the Lyran. You know,
Right.
so that's the good aspect of using the ESG. Obviously, the bad aspect, as you pointed out, is it's an automatic hit because
Yeah.
even at
Well,
range 0, um, yeah, even the Hellboard at range
it's an
0,
automatic
you
hit.
can miss.
Now, what's worse is that if you set the ESG for range 3, you've basically made yourself closer to the Hydran. You've made your ESG weaker. So let's say you hit the range 3 ESG. Let's say it's a 15 pointer,
Mm-hmm.
and you hit it with a 30-point Hellbore, or well, maybe not 30. Well, let's say you're one hex away from the ESG, and you fire your bore. So you're 4 hexes away from the Lyran, but it hits the Lyran like you were at range 1 from the Lyran.
Right. Oh, understood. Which means, you as I said, the downfall of that of the automatic hit is that if the ESGs aren't strong enough to defend off the whole Hellbores, you have to be willing to take that hit. The
Right.
guaranteed
But it
hit.
also means that right. And what it also means is you're never going to use any. And if you know that he's got a bore that could possibly be up, you're not going to use anything except a range 0 ESG.
Right. Right. Because you're going, which again, it changes the calculations of how you use the ESG and how the learn plays. Because of course,
Yeah.
that means you cannot use the ESG to ram people with and get damage against them that way. If the Hellbore is up,
Correct.
because if the Hellbore is available, I'm willing to bet you that the Hydrant will fire it if they're coming in for a battle pass.
Oh yeah.
Because the only time I can imagine that the Hydrant might not is if, let's say, the Lyran actually does a range 3 ESG because he wants to ram them. In that case, the Hydra might want to let him ram him if the Lyran already has a down shield. because obviously then you want to get as much damage on that ship as possible, and just take out the ESG using your ship. But that's comes down to what's the tactical situation in that case.
Yeah, that would be a rare situation where you would let the ESG actually hit in that case, because first of all, the ESG is weaker because they're range 3. Second of all, you can fire the bore at a longer range and very possibly overwhelm the ESG at a range where the Lyran can't really respond as well.
Right. Oh, understood. But it always comes down to that is the big question. Is what does Lyran do when the Hellbore is available, or do you think the Hellbore might be available? Because it is possible for them to be in mixed cycles, because of course you have the 32 impulse cooldown time for the ESG. So it can be almost a 2-turn turnaround. Almost. Obviously, you can. When it comes to cooldown, I forget. One thing I do forget is whether you can charge it while it's cooling down.
I don't believe you can.
So it's more like the fusions, where you can't charge them until the cooldown period is ended.
So it's cooled. Yeah.
Yeah. I said that was one of the things I do not know. Okay. Okay. Let me just go like this. Because one thing I wanted to do, which was share with everybody here, except for you, is the Lyran, just to give people an idea of what it looks like. Who's on the video. So I was a standard Lyran with two SG, 8 phaser 1s, and 2 phaser 3s.
2 P3s. Yep, and 40 power.
Yep.
Burn mode C.
Yep.
Period, I remember that.
Yeah. And I remember them actually modifying this ship. Because if I recall correctly, the original ones was actually the phaser 3s are left side, right side, not 360.
Yes. Well, the standard SSD for the ship in the before tournaments was left side, right side.
Right, and they changed it for the tournament, because actually originally the tournament was the same way. Way back in the day.
Yeah.
I do mean like the original module T, module T for SFB.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember when they did that. I'm that old. I'm playing play tournaments for that long. And of course, then we have the Hydran Lord Marshal with the 2 Hellbores, the 4 fusions, which are interesting by themselves. Of course, the 2 phaser Gs and the 2 fighters.
And the 5 phase ones.
And the what?
2 fighters.
Yeah. And of course,
the 2 fighters and the 5 phaser ones.
Yep.
Yes.
And the large section of center hull, which is the way the Hydran's designed, which I still remember to this day. Paul Scott, the venerable multiple rated ace Paul Scott, said, "I'm going to win the gold hat with the Hydran." After being knocked out twice in the Hydran, he went, "I'm going to go to the ISC." Well, the big issue with the Hydran is very susceptible, can I pronounce it right, to Mizzy attacks. And that's what it kept on dying on, is that the weapons were wiped out. Which, obviously, the key for the Hydran to avoid that speed, maneuverability. Or at least you have to have the ability to, after that, you get that down shield against you. And you're playing the Hydran, that you're able to turn or fly by, so that shield is just not available anymore. Probably turn is probably going to be your best maneuver at that point, because of, given that most of the weapons are forward arc, that's where you're going to be firing. You're firing using your your front shields, possibly even the shield number 1, which obviously, like any other ship, you don't want to lose your shield number 1, but that's standard for most ships. You don't want to lose your shield number 1, because most ships, not all, but most ships, if you lose your shield number 1, you're in deep trouble. In that it makes it harder to fight. Though you can still fight out shield number 2 and shield number 6. That's the truth for most ships. Now, obviously, one thing with the Hydran itself is, of course, it has the hellbore, big surprise. But of course, then you have those fusions.
Yes, you do.
And those,
which can dish out a lot of damage.
Yeah, especially close in, because of course one of the more famous maneuvers is Hydran form of the for the tractor maneuver is called. But anyway, the idea is that you tractor your opponent so they can't go anywhere.
Oh, the anchor.
Put a nice anchor on them, and then go over from one turn to the other, where the first turn, the standard practice of hack and slash maneuver of getting the shield down on the last impulse of the turn, so that the first impulse of the turn you then have other weapons. In this case, get them down with your phasers and your hellbores, and then using your ramp up your fusion beams. Even if you want to, you can do suicide overloads, which is crazy, but you can do it, and fire your fusions at the guy and just totally tear him apart. Because of course, even to do a tractor, you have to be close in range.
Yep.
So by definition, if you tractor them, you're already within range like 2, if not range 1.
Yeah. The only thing to keep in mind is that if the enemy's in range, so are you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Now, of course, I was just thinking about an interesting aspect of this battle is those fighters. Because you can use those fighters in one of two ways. You can actually use them offensively. If you want to, you can protect them. You can wait for the ESGs to go down, then launch the fighters. Or, of course, the whole approach of having the fighters come in behind you. Launch them before the final approach, so that they're ready. Their weapons are hot. The impulses have gone past, and the weapons are hot. So that the Hydran, the ship itself, can knock down the ESGs, either the hellbore with the ship itself, and then the fighters can continue coming in. Now, obviously, the Lyran can, if they want to, they can run away from them. But here's the thing. The Lyran has disruptors. What's the problem with disruptors? They take quite a bit of power on the turn that you overload them. Because if you're going to be coming in close, invariably, those disruptors, you're going to be firing them you're going to find them overloaded. Yeah. And you don't want to try to fire the disruptors against the fighters because of then you have the small target modifier. Got to remember that, which is always fun to deal with, especially with fighters. They have, I forget how close they can come before the small target modifier goes bye-bye. I forget.
Yeah, I don't remember that one.
Yeah. But, so the Hydran has some nice things that it can do against the Lyran.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for the Lyran, both the ESG and the disruptors take a lot of power. But invariably, what ends up, in my mind, ends up happening is that with the ESGs, if you ever have to recharge obviously the first turn for the Lyran, what are you doing? You're going to be topping off those ESGs. Period.
I thought they started full.
I have to remember. I thought they. I'd have to check the rules for ESGs. ESGs are what? I'm just gonna. I think they're. Okay, let's just look at something. ESGs. I thought that was the correct one. It was G23 is the weapon system number, the rule numbers. Because we should all find out real quick. Legendary officers, don't care about that. Yeah, 5 points per on the ESGs. Actually, that is full, isn't it? Okay.
Yes, it is.
And
oh man, I'm hitting a brick wall.
are you getting tired?
I was at work at 4:30 this morning. Yeah, I was at work at 4:30 this morning, and I was at work at 8 o'clock tonight. So,
well, if you're fading fast, man, just go to bed.
I'm already in bed. I'm gonna hang up and go.
Right, then go to sleep. Yeah. Okay, well that's fine.
All right.
Okay, well you have a good night, Barry.
See you next week. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
We lost Barry. Okay. Well, obviously he was a little tired. As this, he originally called, texted me and said that he might not be able to make it in. For the podcast, I'm like, okay, that's fine. Because it didn't matter whether I had Barry here or not. The same topic was going to be the case, which was the Hydran versus Lyran. Just because I decided, okay, this is going to be the topic, and I was going to go forward with it, no matter what, whether it was going to be by myself or with Barry. Obviously it's better with Barry because I can bounce off things off him, but obviously just wore him out, and that's fine. Just making sure here, folks, while you're waiting, just give me a sec here. I just want to make sure about one thing. Okay. For some strange reason, I thought they had you could top them off. Okay. I'm wrong. I thought, okay. Obviously, I'm wrong. So they start topped off. But in any case, the big issue, obviously, with the Lyran and ESGs is the ESGs take a lot of power. They take up to 5 points per, and most of the time you want to completely and utterly have them fully charged to 5. Now, the great thing about the ESGs, of course, are their capacitors, and given that they're capacitors, what that means. Iggy, no. Oh, Okay, I thought that might be the case. Thank you, Chris. Give me a sec. I'll double check that because I thought 7 might be the top, but I was not sure about that because I thought it basically used all the energy in the capacitor itself when you fired it. I thought like maybe 7 was the X. Da-da-da-da. Let's see if I can find. Okay. No, the more up to a maximum of 5 points. Yep, that's what I thought. Oh, okay. Oh, here it is. The capacitor can up to 7 points of energy and release only 1 to 5 points of energy at a time. Okay. And release any unreleased energy remains in the capacitor. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah. Okay, so okay. Right. Okay. So I was right. That you top it off. You start with 5 and can be charged all the way up to 7 so that you have the additional power. So when you use it the first time, you can actually then have already 2 points in the ESG, so you only need 3 more points to recharge later on, because obviously at the beginning of the game, you have the most power and the most flexibility because you start at range, I want to say 35, but I'm pretty sure that's wrong. I feel pretty confident it starts greater than the range 35 because 35 is the maximum range for your drones, for seeking weapons, for controlling seeking weapons, is a maximum range of 35. And also your opponent needs to be within 35 hexes of the seeking weapon, if I recall correctly. That's why I remember range 35. I'm pretty sure they start at range, I want to say 37, but it could be 40. I can't remember off the top of my head, to be honest. But I know it was greater than 35. But anyhow, so basically the thing is that at the beginning of the game, you have the most power and most flexibility. Therefore, if you want to, you could do a corner dodge, if you want, or use a slower approach when it comes to approaching the Hydran. Because, okay, this is the one thing that drives me crazy, and which is the whole idea of what I call the dumb battle pass. That on the first turn, what do the opponents do? Boom! They come right in on each other. Why? Why in God's green earth would you always do that? Now, of course, I'm one of those people who's contrarian in that regard, especially when it comes to the Andromedan. Because a lot of times I would fly the Andromedan, so I would basically do a corner dodge. The idea being is that for the Andromedan, you need the greatest amount of room. It's not wasting time. I'm setting up because the one thing with the Andromedan, you can't just rush in, because you rush in, what you're doing, your greatest distance ever, unless you can actually have your opponent run away, which is not what people want to do with the Andromedan. They want to keep on their tail. Is like range 15. Lord knows I fought John Stiff. But here's the thing. Again, why are you so wanting to basically engage in the middle of the board? Is there a reason why you feel the need to? Is there a good tactical reason to engage in the middle of the board? Now, obviously, the good thing about engaging in the middle of the board is that you both have room to separate. But no, I'm not talking about. We're talking about we're talking about a tournament map which is fixed map, tournament borders. If you hit the tournament wall, you stop and you go speed 5. I'm no sorry. You take 5 points of damage and you stop. You go speed 0. This is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in this case tournament. I'm not talking about the open map. Open map is a totally different kettle of fish. Totally different kettle of fish. But in tournament play, the thing is, if you close in, then if your opponent decides he's not going to run away, after the first battle pass, and he follows you, you better have some deterrent for them not to follow you. That's the beauty of the Zinni. It's the beauty of all the plasma races, all the beauty of all the drone chuckers. Is that if you start following them, they'll just go bing, bing, bing. They'll start chucking those seeking weapons at you while you're trying to chase them. And of course, because you're going towards the seeking weapons because you're trying to get to the ship, the amount of closure is quite fast. So, what's the case of the Hydran? Sorry, back up. The Lyran, I'm looking about the other side. Because with the Lyran has no way of basically deterring his opponent from following him. The only deterrent at all would be if you knock down a shield number 1. In any case, he might be less likely to go running after your butt because of obviously he's going to have his down shield facing you, in which case you just go ping ping and that'll definitely deter him. But my assumption here is that the first battle pass you're not going to get the shield number 1. Overall, on the first battle pass, nobody wants to offer shield number 1. Now the Andromecan offers shield number 1 and actually wants you to hit shield number 1 or shield number 2 or shield number 6, all the same thing. While everybody else, when it comes to Andromeda, they want to get the rear shield or PA panels, which is understandable. But anyway, so as I said, no one's going to hit the shield number 1. But depending upon how because if let's say that you come in, you on the shield number, I'm just thinking about this quickly. Okay, shield number 5, let's say shield number 6 is shield number 6. Nice, oblique, a nice oblique. You fire. Now, the question is, who turns first? Let's say that the Lyran turns first. The Hydran turns. Now he's got a good shield towards the Lyran. And he keeps on chasing him. Now, what's going to stop at some point, that Lyran is going to end up, boom, against the wall. What's the good thing about that wall? Well, let's get out those nice fighters at some point as it heads towards the wall, because of sooner or later, because remember, these are fighters not seeking weapons. Though, of course, Sandy Hemingway called them, what was it? Mobile nuclear space mines. This is basically what they are. Because of their weapons. Because if their weapons get to range 0, you're so toast. So toast. Because they got the 2 fusions and the 1 phaser G. So that those fighters can corner you. And there's additional weapons. And of course then you have the Hydran who can also corner you. Now, and there's nothing that you can do about them to stop them from cornering you at that point. That's why you have to, and as long as the Hydran they're both turn mode C. So in theory, as long as the Hydran is moving slower, because here this is where outside versus outer circle and inner circle matter. Because if you give up that central ground, what happens is that Now you have to go faster to keep up to the same speed that the inner circle person is doing, which can go at a slower speed and get a tighter turn radius and still keep you in his front arc. I've experienced this myself, so I know exactly how it works. So that's why it's like I look at going right into the center when it comes to that, especially because on this matchup there is no deterrent. Okay, now if let's say instead of the Lyran turning away, the Hydran turns away. Okay, and the Lyran just wants to go chasing after him. Now, this is a little different. The Hydran does have a deterrent. He does have those fighters, and depending upon timing and so forth, obviously, the Lyran on the next turn depends upon completely about timing here. The Lyran on the next turn, he can actually knock, pew, pew, fire down the fighters. But of course, at that point, you're also using up your energy. And after you've gone through the first battle pass, your energy is pretty low. Because at the very least, the Lyran has fired 6 phaser 1s. You're probably topped off your ESGs. Not sure if you've raised your ESGs or not. Because you could have raised your ESGs, and then the Hydran fires Hellbores at the ESGs, knocked down the ESGs, done some damage with the Hellbores, and then fired probably the phase 1s, at that point, and probably just holding his fusions at that point, because I'm assuming that the Lyran is not going to want to get very close, because lo and behold, those phase Gs and those fusions can hurt quite a lot. Yeah, Chris, play a little bit of tournament. You'll find out these things. But anyhow, excuse me. So, so it's more power, which means the next turn the Lyran has to go even slower. And if the Lyran goes slower, that means that he can't go as fast. The Hydran still has to deal with his power consumption issues, because of the Hydran most probably is not going to overload his Hellbores all the time. Every single battle pass, because of it takes 6 per Hellbore on the battle turn. So of the 40 power, if you decide to, you can, if you want. You can, if the Hydran decides to overload both Hellbores, that's 12 points of energy. That's 12 points out of 28 points of energy. Then you got the normal 4, which you have to take out. So that's 24 points of energy. So if you go and of course you're holding at least 4, let's say you're holding the 4 fusions. So that goes you down to 20. So your max speed is speed 20 overall. Okay, let's back up. Not max speed. The max movement rate for the turn is 20. Yeah, Dave, there is a barrier along the map edge in the tournament, on the tournament map. That's where if you try to go outside the map, instead of you using a floating map and you actually can move the units, it hits the wall, stops, and takes 5 points of damage on that shield. Now, just a little quick thing on that wall. That wall is not good for the Lyran, because also the Lyran's, if I recall correctly, if the Lyran's ESG hits the wall, it does damage against the ESG. Let me just check on because there's tournament barrier. Just let's see. ESGs. ESGs interact with the barrier as if they are a web. Note that it is impossible for a unit to be in a barrier hex, as the barrier is impermeable and effectively just off the edge. So that means that it doesn't damage the ESG. It just makes it like a hole in it, kind of thing. So, yeah. Yeah, fun stuff. Yeah, that's different. If a unit is displaced off the map, it's put on a last edge hex. Big surprise. It does not stop or take damage. Note that while displacement into the barrier does not result in a collision with it, a displaced unit's subsequent movement after displacement can result in a collision with the barrier. That is true. Though, as I think I told a story a while back where I voluntarily, as weird as that might sound, voluntarily slammed into the tournament barrier. It was either slam into it or get hit by 2 Type 4 drones. Lesser 2 evils, you know. And I almost pulled that one out. Almost pulled it. That actually, the funny part about that game in my mind was that it was one of those games where the Klingon got some internals on me, and we had the cascading effect occur. And that was one of those times when, for me, I was dead. I was dead. When you get the cascading effect, you're dead. But he kept on getting the cascading effect. And actually, with that, we started getting this crowd around us. That they just wanted to see how this cascading effect, how long the cascading effect would occur. How many times would the Klingon roll a drone, which is, the drone hit is what you do for a PA panel, and the PA panel was full. All the PA panels were full. So you knock out a PA panel and boom. Okay, put that aside. Especially if you don't, if your batteries are gone, your batteries are going to be gone pretty quickly. And so you set that aside and you do that. That's another volley. Is that cascade? That's another volley. So we did that for cascaded. I forget if it was 3 or 4 times. It's been a long time, so I don't quite remember. But I remember that the last time the cascade happened and we didn't get another cascade, everyone heard everyone go, "Oh," because they wanted to keep going. They wanted me to completely blow up in the Andromeda, and to a certain degree, that's I was trying to pull it out and I didn't. It's like, okay, I didn't. But that was, as strange as that might sound, it was fun watching someone else blow up my ship and just to seeing if it was possible to cascade the ship all the way to have it blow up. That was, because when it comes to the chances of actually doing that, that's pretty slim. But it was incredible. So it was a fun way of ending the game after he did the internals. The game was over at that point. It's like, I realized, like, yeah. we could have stopped it there because, after he got the number of internals and then got the cascade, we could say, oh, well, the game's over. But he went, let's see how far this goes. Just because at that point, I know we're dead. We both want to see how far it goes. And that's the thing. That's the part of it that made it fun. As strange as that might sound, losing a game, I had so much fun doing that. Especially that part of the game where I was put into a situation where I could either, basically, is that I could either turn in towards the corner, get my phasers in arc and knock down those drones and survive. But the problem is I didn't have enough energy to hit and not hit the barrier. So I had a choice. I could either use the energy I had to fire my phasers and knock down the drones, or I could, basically have them hit me, and I'd have the maneuverability, and I did not have that. It's like, no. But anyway, I said that's part of it that made it fun. Okay, back to the Lyran versus the Hydran. Sorry, I got sidetracked by that, going down memory lane. But anyway, so what does that mean tactically when it comes to speeds and so forth? What's the main tactics here? Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the big key here when it comes to tactics is the Lyran has to decide, what is he going to be using the ESGs for? Will he use them as these Hellbore shields? Now, if you can use it for Hellbore shields, the one thing you got to do is the Lyran has to press the Hydran. I forced the Hydran to fire his Hellbores because the Hydran knows one thing. He knows that that ESG can only be up for 32 impulses. Now, given that it only be up for 32 impulses before it goes bye-bye, or obviously the Lyran can bring it down earlier, the Hydran has the option not to fire. Of course, if he has them overloaded, then he has no option. But in which case you've forced him. See, that's part of what this game is about when it comes to tactics and so forth. The thing with tactics and the weapons and so forth is forcing your opponent to make decisions. That having you in control of the situation. That's ultimately what you're trying to do. You're trying to control to as degree that you can what your opponent does. So you force him into a situation where he has to make a decision. In the case of the Hydran, if the Lyran brings up his ESG and it's a non-zero, let's say it's range 2. And at that point, if the Hydran is not, has his Hellbores available, and the Lyran is going to be closing, and he knows that the Lyran will hit him, the Hydran has an option at that point. Is the Hydran going to fire his Hellbores, or is the Hydran going to let the ESGs hit his ship, and then use the Hellbores to fire purely against the ship and get as much energy, much damage against the ship as possible? And then, of course, you have to remember at that point is, again, there's those choices. And that is that if the Hydran fires at the Hellbore at the ESG, it's an automatic hit. So, yes, it's reduced the amount of damage that you're going to apply to the Lyran shields, possibly even the Lyran ship itself. But it's a guaranteed hit. Versus having he rams into you, you take the damage to your shields, and of course after that he is going to follow up that same impulse and go boo. And hopefully your Hellbores will survive, because most probably he'll get an internal, if not multiple internals. No, actually, at that point, it doesn't matter, because you're going to be fine. If you let it hit you, after he hits you, you're going to fire immediately on that Hellbore, using your Hellbore upon the ship, so there won't be any degradation in amount of damage. But at that point, you're rolling the dice. And I have seen it. I've seen it with my own eyes. Hellbores that have a person flying the Hydran and then fire the Hellbore, and they get 2 6s. So they roll a 12 at a range 1. So they completely and utterly miss. And now you got nothing. You got absolute nothing. So, again, the Lyran has to force the choices upon the Hydran. Now, if the Lyran wants to, he can definitely save up his ESGs and don't use them. Oh, agreed. Agreed. Well, Iggy, I agree that thinking that your opponent is gonna thinking that you're gonna miss a 1 in 36 chance of missing with the Hellbore, basing the strategy of you're gonna guarantee a hit at range 2 versus a possibility of a miss on range 1. Yeah, I understand that. But of course, then you have to take in consideration at that point also it's going to be the ESGs are going to hit your ship, and can you take that damage? But the only reason I pointed out that slim, I know it's slim, there is still that possibility that you'll miss. I'm not saying that should be your overriding fear that you're going to miss. But if this is like the death blow, where you've got to kill him, or you're dead yourself, are you going to take that chance? You might be able to take a lesser damage and still survive. But if you miss that Hellbore completely, then you're toast. There's that possibility, and that's one thing to think about. Now, as I was getting into, which is the Lyran, obviously, if you want to, you completely obfuscate that fact and just have it so that you try to use the ESGs when the Hydran is charging these Hellbores. Now, of course, at the same time, the Hydra is going to be charging Hellbore, so is he going to want to engage? No, he's going to not want to engage. In that case, that is when this whole going to the center board and then have the Hydran turn up instead of you turn off comes into play. Because one thing to keep in mind about this matchup is that the Hydran is susceptible to Mizzy attacks. Therefore, let's say that the Lyran wants to take advantage of at the very least that fear, because that is a fear that has some merit in it, and that is that if the Lyran is willing to hold back, let's say there's one phaser, just one, and then what that might do is, instead of, because you're on the oblique, if you just continue going and the Lyran has not to be afraid of not getting some additional internals. Because obviously you got the phaser 3, so you should be pretty protected against losing that phaser 1. And at that point, the Hydran was probably going to want to turn away. You can turn in against him at that point. Now, obviously, it's new shield, but that's the whole point. The Hydran is going to want to bring to bear that new shield, in which case the Lyran can be the chaser instead of the chasee. So I think you limit the amount of damage that you can do against the Hydran. Now, on the first battle pass, here's always the gotcha of the first battle passes. The first battle pass, you can't overload all 4 disruptors. Period. You can't. Because of, if you're going slow and your opponent sees that you're going slow and he's going really slow. that means one of two things. Either he's using a lot of reinforcement, possible, or they've got their disruptors fully overloaded, which takes a lot of power, in which case you're going much slower. He might stay out of range 8. Might say, I'm going to go corner dodge. And so it's going to completely waste that first turn, the strategy that you had of firing all 4 fully overloaded disruptors at him. The most often used strategy is this, and that is half of the disruptors are overloaded, half of them are not. Because of the one thing you can do in that situation is you can, if you really feel the need to overload, you think it's a good situation to use it and do it, you can then use 2 points of power to change the standards to overloads. Now, that's the reason why that's used is because just in case that the Hydran decides, I'm not going to engage fully, meaning he's not going to get within overloaded range on that turn. At least at that point, you're not wasting 16 points of energy for nothing. So that's why they hedge their bets by only overloading 2 of the disruptors and leave 2 of the disruptors standard. So let's look at the Hydran's approach for a moment. What does the Hydran going to want to do? Well, the Hydran's going to do what the Hydran's going to want to do, and that is the Hydran wants to get up close and personal. Now, the obvious issue with getting up close and personal is that when you get up close and personal, that you have the issue that Mizzy attacks. And as I pointed out earlier in the podcast, the whole issue that why Paul Scott gave up on trying to use the Hydran to get the gold hat, because of his opponents were able to not even, they were able to knock out enough weapons early on in the fight for him to go, I give up. Because Paul Scott is a very good player, and he evaluates the situation quickly and very well. So he in theory, I'm willing to bet you that Paul Scott probably could have pulled out some of those battles, but he did not feel like it was worth his time to try on a desperate chance that his opponent was going to screw up and he was going to win. So I honestly I think it was right for switching, and that just points out that it's hard to win in the Hydran. And I understand that. And overall, I think that wow, the Colts are beating the Jets 42-10. Dang, middle of the third, just in case you want to know. You can win in the Hydran. I'm not saying you can't. And if you enjoy playing the Hydran, please play the Hydran. It's like me playing the Andromedan. The Andromedan invariably loses because there are certain matchups which it doesn't have much of a chance against. But the Hydran can win. It's just that it has to be cognizant of the issue of Mysia. And obviously part of that, and just like any other tournament ship, it depends upon what matchups you get. Because if the Hydran, if the Hydran is facing, like, let's say I was thinking about the Fed, but the Hydran Fed is an interesting situation in that they both want to be close, but and the both of them don't want to be close. It's a tough situation because of Range 2 is when the Fed wants to be there because it has the best chance of hitting with 64 points of damage with 4 fully overloaded photons. Versus the Hydran, which wants range 2, so he can fire his phaser Gs, fire his fusions, hit with his hellbores, and possibly even bring his fighters to bear. Now the thing is, there was a modification to the Fed so that those fighters might be a little less effective because of it actually has some ADRACs, so it can actually bing bing, try to knock them down, and it could possibly do it because I think it's got enough ad rounds. Sorry, it's got not a phaser G, a Type G drone rack. So it can fire ad rounds. It's one of those weird animals. But anyhow, so the Hydran overall, it's got a chance, but it just has to be cognizant of the Mizia effect. So so as I pointed out, it has to possibly turn away when normally you wouldn't have to. Now, obviously, here's the thing. In that same situation which I just mentioned, where the Lyran holds back that phaser, let's say that the Lyran doesn't hold back that phaser. Now, obviously, he automatically will be holding back like 2 of his phasers. Now, this is where it gets difficult. Because of if the Hydran has the forethought to hold his batteries, number one, because the batteries will never die, because you have to get through all the center hold for it to die. If he wants to can hold those batteries back. And the Hydran is going faster than the Lyran. And the Lyran decides it's going to hit to get those 2 phaser 1s to bear. And the thing is, the Lyran's going to know this. That you're held back your batteries. He'll know it. And if he thinks that you have not, then he might hit. But if he feels like you did, he won't do this, which is because it'd be pointless. Which is him heading to get on your down shield, and then you heading away. Or heading to get your shield out of your down shield away from the fire. Now, that's why I say that the Lyran has to left at least 1 phaser unfired to force the Hydran to turn. But the Lyran doesn't do that. The Lyran decides, I'm willing to fire that additional phaser because I want that additional, 4 points of damage? Possibly. Depends upon the range, obviously. Let's say 4. Then, given that, let's say then the Hydran was probably just going to, it can keep going. Now, obviously, if the Lyran still has the 360 phaser 3s, and if he wants to fire them, fire. You've got that range is probably going to be a 1/3 chance of getting an Eternal for half a point of energy. Yeah. Would you take the chance? Probably take the chance because it's a nice down shield and you can do some Mizia damage. You can knock out an additional Hellbore. And if you do that, hey, you won. Good. The luck was with you. But if you miss, you better be turning soon, dude. Because the Hydran will be turning in towards you. And he won't care that the shield's facing you. Obviously, the Hydran has to be careful because of when the Lyran turns away, all of a sudden the other side can come in to can come into arc. But if you turn early enough, you can probably keep. If you side slip towards the Lyran, then you could probably keep that down shield away from them. So it's an interesting matchup to watch. It has some real tough tactical decisions that have to be made. And obviously one of those tactical decisions for the Hydran also is, how is it going to use the fighters? When it comes to Lyran, it's much different, much different than any seeking weapon. Because seeking weapon, what you might do is launch your fighters, then tractor them, drag them along with you so they can keep up with you, and then when the seeking weapon is launched, you can let go of the tractors, and you can use them for basically additional 2 phaser Gs against any seeking weapon, and poof, they disappear. So anyhow, I think I'll wrap it up with that. Please, if you have an opportunity, play some tournament ships, because they're interesting. I'm not saying they are balanced, because no ships will be balanced. No matter what. So with that, I am Paul Franz, and I bid you a good night.